The Toronto Blue Jays' needs have been very well documented in this last stretch of play. However, there's one big fish on the market that many people are not talking about aside from this notable baseball podcast. The Just Baseball show mentioned Shane Bieber and the Toronto Blue Jays as a potential match during the trade market. So we'll break that down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And pretty big bombshell dropped out of the Just Baseball podcast just the other day. They mentioned Shane Bieber, among other teams as well, and particularly the Blue Jays as a potential match made in heaven for this trade market that is coming up. That is very rapidly approaching. And do the Jays have enough to put a package together? That's what we're going to try to dissect in this video, but it is definitely an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, we'll touch on the Jays and, of course, and another team as well that got mentioned in the video. Before we get into it, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 7,500. And, Peter, like you said, I'll let you take over a little bit here because you're the one who was listening to the podcast and kind of brought this upon. And this is the podcast episode. If you want to go have a look, the Just Baseball show, and you can see it number 2 there. It says if you were to put a package together for Shane Bieber for a trade, what would that look like? And we do have a mock trade to go over here in a couple of minutes. But within this, they talked about a couple of teams. 2 of them are in the AL East. Obviously, one of them the Blue Jays. The other one we'll touch on in a minute here. It's the Baltimore Orioles. But, Peter, what are your thoughts on Shane Bieber's season so far this year? And if you think the Jays have enough to get him, we do have a package put together, as well as what they mentioned more specifically on that podcast.
Yeah, full disclosure about Shane Bieber. He's not the same pitcher that he once was when he won the Cy Young. His strikeouts are way down. He just doesn't have that same velocity, that same zip to his pitches. So I don't know if I would give up as much to go out there and get him. And I'm not necessarily sure that he moves the needle as much as we would like to think as Blue Jay fans. So I'd probably make a package centered around one of our top prospects. But Cleveland, I don't know if they'll be so eager to trade him either because you still have 2 years of control with him, and they're trying to win right now because they signed Jose Ramirez to that pretty big deal. They play in a very weak division. They have a chance to win year in, year out. So I don't know if Cleveland is necessarily knocking on the door to trade Shane Bieber, but it's definitely an interesting discussion to have had. But I don't know how much I'd be willing to part ways with to go out and get Shane Bieber.
Yeah, we'll touch on that now in a sec. But a good point is the 2 years of control. You'd almost think that the Cleveland Guardians will maybe keep him for this year, see if they can compete, and then maybe flip him at the deadline next year. Obviously, he'll get a bit less, but if the case they are competing, even this year or next year, they'd be able to kind of hold on to him because he is still a game changer for a lot of teams. Who knows if he put us over the top? You'd like to think so. But like we've spoken on so many times here, the offense needs to step up regardless of who we bring in. The main guys, specifically Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who's having the worst season of his, I guess, since his rookie year. But let's get into it now, the trade that we brought up here. And Peter, you made this one up, and I think it's going to take a package like this. Now, it hurts because you'd have to give up Danny Jansen, and who knows if they're actually going to give up Danny Jansen, but Brendan Barriera, Danny Jansen, and Aurelvis Martinez. And Aurelvis Martinez is having a sneaky, decently good minor league season after that pretty rough start. He's finally starting to get some batted balls in play luck there, and he's hitting some home runs. So what are your thoughts on this trade?
It's what it's going to take to go out and acquire Shane Bieber. And he may not be the same pitcher anymore, but if you look at his last outing against the Houston Astros, he went 7 innings, he had 9 strikeouts, and that's a very good team that he did that against. So maybe it's an indication that he is headed in the right direction, but it's going to take a big package nonetheless, whether it's Shane Bieber from 2020 or Shane Bieber from 2023. He's still an elite innings-eating pitcher that is going to throw over 200 innings in the season. He currently leads the American League in innings pitched with 85, so that's very valuable in itself, but I still don't think this gets the Jays over the top just because of their offensive struggles that you did allude to. But we will go over the trade package right here. And if you pull it up for me, Nick, you can see that it's Danny Jansen, Brandon Barriera, and Aurelvis Martinez for Shane Bieber. Now, the reason why the Cleveland Guardians might accept this is because their catching position has been one of the worst in all of Major League Baseball. Danny Jansen instantly fortifies that, and you give them a prized pitching prospect like Brandon Barriera and someone who's not too far away from the major leagues in Aurelvis Martinez, who can definitely add some power once he is ready to make an impact at the next level for that lineup. So I think they would go for this trade. I don't necessarily think I would pull the trigger if I'm Ross Atkins and company, but it's definitely something to float by the Cleveland Guardians. Maybe take Danny Jansen away, see if they're biting, but I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a lot to give up for declining Shane Bieber, but who knows? I just don't think starting pitching is the biggest need that the Blue Jays have at this current moment. So I don't know if I'd necessarily put together that type of package.
Yeah, it's very, very tough. And like I said a couple minutes ago there, Relvis Martinez having a great, at least stretch of games over the past couple weeks. He started off horribly, and he's a guy who's on the rise, and maybe he's more major league ready than obviously Brandon Barriere is, him being super young. But Danny Jansen's kind of almost the key probably piece here for the Guardians in a way. Like you said, their catching depth is not very good. He is a great catcher when he's healthy. He hasn't been able to be healthy for a sustainable period of time, for the past so many years. When he has been healthy, 250 average and some really good OPS plus. But like you said, interesting package. The values line up a little bit, and the question is would the Blue Jays rather go and spend big money on a starter like this to replace the Alek Manoah spot, or would they rather kind of do a band-aid like we did a video on a couple days ago? And again, looking at Shane Bieber's stats here, you alluded to 2020. What a season for him. Obviously, it was 12 games. He had a 1.63 ERA, but he hasn't had a season above a 4 ERA since his rookie year in 2018. And he even had a great year last year. You can look at this now. He's an innings eater at 200 innings last year, and 3.29, very respectable ERA. He'd probably slide right into
Hmm.
our number. I mean, I don't even know where at this point. Probably number two,
Probably
you'd think.
two.
Yeah,
Probably
two.
two.
Barrios
Yeah.
has been great. Bassett's been great. So we'd have a very, very good starting rotation. But either way, the offense needs to step it up. But if you could pull a trigger on a deal like this and maybe, like you said, maybe replace Danny Jansen with a different prospect or something. But again, the Guardians will probably have lots of suitors if they do go to trade for him. And Danny Jansen would be the key piece because he's not young, but he's also not old. He could be a sustainable piece for the next 4 or 5 years for them.
Yeah, and the other team that was mentioned in the AL East is the Baltimore Orioles, and I think they have a much better package to put together than the Blue Jays do, just because of their minor league depth that they are boasting right now. And the Just Baseball show that I was alluding to over there, they mentioned the Baltimore Orioles as probably a better candidate to trade for Shane Bieber because they didn't expect to be this good, and they have the assets to be buyers at the deadline because last year they sold. They weren't necessarily sold on the core that they had. They didn't think they were ready for a playoff run. And that makes sense. You were led by a rookie Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson as well. So it makes sense as to why you didn't pull the trigger and rather sold at the deadline. But this year they have the second best record in baseball, and they can put together a package with top prospects that don't hurt any of their major league talent pool. So it would be very interesting to monitor that situation.
Yeah, they have the consensus. They were talking about the broadcast, number one farm system in baseball, paired with the best, one of the best, if not the best, young core in baseball. They're going to be hard. They could get any player they want at the deadline, realistically, with the package they have. And if Shane Bieber's out there, it would make sense for the Orioles, especially because they're having such a good team this year to add a veteran pitcher. It'd almost be a perfect fit for them. So if you're an Orioles fan watching this, then that would probably make a bit more sense. But from the Jays standpoint, it still makes a ton of sense. It'd just be a matter of if they'd want to, have a big package like that, like the one we alluded to, or if they would maybe, it depends what the Guardians' asking price is, and that'll obviously be determined closer to the deadline, I would assume, which also doesn't bode well for the Jays as they're trying to get that number 5 starter. But any other quick thoughts before we wrap up and end the video?
Similar to last season, Nick, how the Jays approached the deadline is they waited and they waited to see what kind of team that they were going to be. And they didn't think that they could be a contender last year. They didn't think that they would be there standing towards the end. And it makes sense, That's why they didn't pull the trigger on any of those big moves like Juan Soto. Not saying that they had the artillery to go pull that off, but it's similar to this year. If they think by August or by July, whenever the deadline is, that they're not ready to compete, then I doubt that they're going to make a big move like this and rather try to maybe replenish their farm system by trading Matt Chapman or maybe some of those other expiring deals.
Yeah, that'll be the big question going forward is if they are, I'd assume they're going to be buyers unless something crazy happens, but it's definitely a question to be had. But that'll wrap up the video. Let us know your trade potential packages and your thoughts on that Bieber trade and if you think he'd be a good fit. And hopefully the Jays win tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow.